Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare.
Thank you everybody for coming this afternoon. I think, for me this is one of the most interesting parts of this festival. I think that our movement has, our community, if you like, has not really made enough of the business elements and the aspect of actually, living in this world, and that means obviously having a job and being able to be responsible for yourself and your family, and beyond that, then you can support obviously the community. And this starts by obviously being educated and having some sort of spirit or motivation to be successful in whatever path you pursue. So this was the aim of organising this business conference, and I've invited several key people to talk who've got some wide-ranging experience. I'll introduce them quickly. First, on my right is my father, Hare Krishna Das, abbreviated as HKD back in the ISKCON days, back in the day. He'll be giving a keynote speech. He runs Rig Investments, which is a family-owned venture capital fund in the Netherlands. We have a wide range of investments, primarily focused at the moment on media and energy. And he started though from a very humble background and worked his way up, and is now worth hundreds of millions of euros, and is quite a personality in the Netherlands, the equivalent of the Fortune 500, but in the Netherlands. So he's going to give us his experiences on how to make it successful, and so that'll be very exciting. On my left is Kulimela, as you've already met. He works for Euromoney Institutional Investors. They're one of the top 3 global companies for CEOs and CFOs, and they provide information, market information, surveys, reports for the financial community, as well as organising conferences and events. And he works as a business development officer, reporting directly to the chairman. He's been working there for 7 years. The company has a turnover of about $500 million, so that's no small position to be reporting to the chairman of this company. So he can share with us some of his experience. Next to my father is Samba. Samba's been running his own high luxury goods company, focused mainly on jewelry, but other stuff. It's been running for about 10 years. Started in New Vrindaban, also working in LA. Some of his jewelry is really, he's only Lenny Kravitz, Janet Jackson, Madonna. It's in Japan. It's huge cult status. So it's he knows how to sell to big people, and he's just opened a store in Los Angeles as well now. So he'll be also able to give us a good view of what it takes to start up a business. Amanda Bardini, on my left, next to Kapila. She's been working in the sales industry, really with cars, for several years now. She's currently the head of the Internet Fleet Department for Midway Ford and Suzuki. She also works with Primerica Financial, involved with refinancing mortgages, life insurance, so she can give us her experience in these areas. On my next to Samba, we have Chaitanya. Chaitanya is the operational director for 5 years now, together with Samba in Lomons. So he also has a BA degree in business management, MBA. So he's well educated and experienced in business, so he can give us his views. And finally, we have Govinda, who's just started a partnership with 2 other colleagues. And it's called Freight Exchange. They broker freight across the US, but also worldwide. And they've been running for about a year now, and they're looking to expand. So he's just starting out in business, but he's been active for many years before that in other types. So this is our panel, a very distinct distinguished speakers here, and they've got a lot of advice. Just to say a little bit about myself as well very quickly, I'm currently the CEO of a $20 million joint venture called Kulimela Gaming, focused on mobile game content, mobile entertainment content that's just started up in the last year, and I'm just busy in Holland, and it's going to be worldwide, just getting that up and running. So I'll be sharing it, but I'll pass you over to Hare Krishna.
Well, thank you, Bala, for the introduction. And first of all, I'd like to say that I'm extremely pleased, honored to be here this afternoon to be able to give this address. I think it's also extremely exciting to see so many wonderful Vaishnavas here and gathering for something which I think is extremely important and that may lay the foundation for developments in the future in relation to the whole development of the Vaishnava movement in the world. So I'm very impressed also with the panel sitting here to the right of me and to the left. I think we will have a very interesting discussion. I'd like to start with saying something that is of a bit more philosophical nature. It has been a constant, in a way, struggle in terms of understanding the importance of economic development in any spiritual organization or for society at large. I think there's a very common misunderstanding that has been rooted in our Western upbringing, and particularly in our Christian upbringing, which is the idea that spirituality and poverty, they actually go hand in hand, and that spiritual development and wealth and economic development and an improved standard of living are things that do not go well together. And I think this is the first fundamental misunderstanding that has to be removed before we can start on the path of both spiritual and material development. The Vedic point of view in this respect is very different from the traditional Christian point of view. And I'm not saying that to bash Christianity and to be overly critical, but it is a serious problem. And let me try to explain it a little bit historically. Christianity started off first centuries after Christ, with the idea that we can only evolve spiritually if we are poor and if we renounce the world in every aspect. And this has been a thread that has been running through Christian thinking for centuries. And the key problem here is that the distinction has not been made sufficiently that wealth and personal strictness, if you like, or discipline are two separate things. One can be surrounded by wealth and yet still maintain a personally disciplined and even renounced way of life. The Vedic point of view is that if you want to evolve spiritually as a person, as an individual, and as a society, we do need economic development. Economic development is key. You know, we know the four principles of the of Vedic civilization, which is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma means economic, in a way, Dharma means rules and regulations, organization and discipline. When we apply that, when we apply the principle of organization and discipline, sadhana, both on an individual and a collective level, we can then evolve into a society that becomes efficient, which leads to economic development. And when we have economic development, we can then evolve to the next phase, which is that we are not only busy with taking care of our primary needs, struggling hard just to make a living, struggling hard just to have a roof over our heads, but we can then actually use the wealth that we gather to start using our time on different things than economic development, which is spiritual development. That brings us to the third principle, which is Kama. Kama is interpreted to mean, on one hand, enjoyment, because it's true that economic development can also bring about, enjoyment. It can bring about a certain level of sense gratification. But here, that does not necessarily imply that that's the only thing it will bring. It also brings prosperity and the ability to embellish our environment. And the embellishment of our environment and the production of, one can say, art, beauty, harmony, artistic things, that can have an elevating effect on our consciousness, which leads to the fourth principle, which is moksha, liberation. So this is the Vedic system. And the Vedic system, unfortunately, I must say, in our ISKCON society, has often been misunderstood. We've also embraced, to some extent, the idea, the Christian idea, that we need to be poor, that we need to be miserable, that things need to fall apart, and then we are spiritually advancing. That's not true. In fact, it's counterproductive. When we live in horrible conditions, when we don't have good food to eat, when we have to struggle to take care of our physical needs and medical care, and we have to live in a horrible environment full of factories and dirt and nasty and horrible things, how can that be conducive for spiritual development? Vedic culture is based on the idea that we have strong economic development, that there's wealth, that there's prosperity, and with that prosperity we can invest in the quality of life, both individually and as a society. And that quality of life should mean that there's good medical facilities, that there's good health care, that there's good education, that there's good facilities to allow us to function properly, and that we can have a society which is mature and developed in every respect, so that we can evolve as human beings to a higher plane, that we can, through the material facilities that have been created, that we can actually evolve our consciousness to the level that we are becoming interested in spiritual development, which is moksha, and that's the end result. Now, I know that this is sometimes paradoxical, and many times it has been misunderstood, but the fact is, and we can find that in one of the first aphorisms in the Vedanta Sutra, which state that atata brahmani gyasha, which means that in the human form of life, we are capable of evolving to a higher level of consciousness. Why? Because in the human form of life, the material conditions required for spiritual development are there. And in the animal form of life, in the lower species of life, that material condition is not there. So that's an important point to indicate and to establish that material facilities and material environment are extremely important to facilitate spiritual development. If we think that we can achieve spiritual development without the necessary prerequisite material conditions, then that's a mistake. If, for instance, if you live in a society that's ridden by war, by famine, by political strife, by upheaval, by disturbances, people will not have the peace of mind, people will not have the facility to focus on spiritual development. If, to the contrary, we live in a society where there is peace, where there's tranquility, where there's material prosperity, where there are good educational systems, and people are able to function, materially speaking, without too many interruptions and too many headaches and problems, and no war, then there is a prerequisite condition has been created for spiritual evolution to take place. That is the essence of Vedic culture. Now, it is true, of course, that material development sometimes is utilized for personal gains only, to the point that people may become decadent, may adopt a lifestyle which is not conducive spiritually. But that can also be done if you're poor. I mean, how many people are there out in the street, bums and they drink and drug addicts, and are they rich? No, they are poor, they have nothing. But they are living the most decadent life that you can possibly imagine. So it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with the overabundance of wealth. It has to do with your personal training, with your personal education, and your personal ability to make the right choices in life, which has everything to do with education. And education, we all know, costs a lot of money. Without money, we cannot have good education, and we cannot have this kind of spiritual